Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe will appear before two parliamentary committees in Canberra this week, one on Wednesday and the second on Friday. Expect the governor to be grilled about the massive jump in interest rates, the Reserve Bank's hawkish economic outlook, and the governor's appearance at a private event on Thursday last week with some of the country's biggest rates traders. Well, joining me now is independent economist Warren Hogan. Warren, thanks for your time. Governor clearly under a lot of pressure. Do you think he regrets his decision to hold that private briefing with interest rate traders last week?
Yeah, g'day Ed. Thanks for having me on the show. I think he probably does. Apparently they've cancelled another one in Melbourne. But to be clear, they have been briefing market participants after the event, after an announcement or a release of the monetary policy statement. For well over a decade. It goes back to previous governors. So I think what the problem here is the perceived big shift in stance, which I don't agree they've shifted much, but that perception combined with the fact that he didn't do the press club lunch. So he hasn't gone out there and done a public speech for all to hear, and particularly the press to ask him questions. So I think that's the situation as it stands, and it's going to make for obviously an even trickier week than what was always going to be a very difficult session in front of the politicians this week.
Yeah, the governor's done that press club speech the last 4 years in a row. But look, he's obviously appearing twice before Parliament this week. What are you hoping to hear Governor Lowe talk about?
Look, I think it's just further explanation of the current challenge facing the Australian economy. And look, I don't think they've shifted much. Yes, they didn't have many public communications since their board meeting in December, and that's the biggest sort of gap between meetings we have each year. And the reality is the Australian economy's continued to produce good outcomes, and of course the inflation figures were higher. So they've just changed their forecasts and the balance of risk to their view in reflection of that. And I think a lot of the commentators and economists didn't pick up on that. And I think that's really what the shock here is the RBA has not ever signalled they're anywhere near the end of this rate hike cycle. They've always kept it open-ended. And if anything, we're lagging the rest of the world. They're trying to minimise how many rate hikes they've got to do. They're giving the economy every chance to slow. But I think really what he's got to do now is explain to the broader community and our political leadership that we can either get on top of this quickly, get a slowdown, avoid recession and get a recovery happening next year. Or if we get behind this, rates will have to go so high we've got no choice but having a big damaging recession. And I think they're the two clear core scenarios. And the sooner they get rates up to 4%, the more likely we are we're going to get through this unscathed.
Yeah, interest rates in the US, obviously 4.75%. How high do you think rates will go this year in Australia?
Well, my view has been the same for 3 or 4 months now, and that is we need to get the cash rate over 4. And that will get that slowdown, and we will look quite soft at the end of the year, but we need to. We need to slow this economy, take the excess demand out of it, and get that inflation down quick smart. The alternative view, which I think is pretty clear now that the RBA has sort of made these shifts, is a much stronger economy and much higher interest rates. So really, I think it's a matter of getting that cash rate up to about 4.25, something around that, and then pausing. And hopefully that'll be enough. Hopefully the world economy will be turning down, and hopefully that'll get the job done here.
Yeah, and just how big now is the risk of a shallow recession for Australia?
Well, I think we got every chance of getting a technical recession, those 2 quarters of negative GDP. And I think if we try and avoid that at all costs, we're going to leave ourselves open to a much worse recession. And the reality is a short-lived and mild recession, which we recover from quickly, may be our best hope of getting this inflation out of the system and being able to bring the economy back to a steady state. So I think it's a good chance we get a very technical recession, but it's not going to be a recession that everyone fears. It's not the recession like we had in the early 90s or the GFC that we saw overseas. It's not going to be associated with surging unemployment and mass business failure. And I think the fact that we're trying to avoid a recession at all costs actually, ironically, is giving us our best chance of actually having one by getting behind the game on inflation.
Well, Warren Hogan, thanks for coming on the show today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ed.